One of his biggest demons is that his father left him, so he's dealing with abandonment issues. He does not trust people because his father left him. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode with your host, Alex Payne. And today we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. I'll begin by saying that 2 days ago, or actually yesterday morning, early morning hours, my father passed away. And it's been a little rough, but thankfully I have a good support system and I've trained and developed myself to a certain way where I'm able to take the dick punches that life gives me sometimes, like it does to all of us. And I reflected on a lot. And today's episode, I want to dedicate to my dad. And the name of today's episode is What I've Learned from My Father. And what I'm going to share with you guys is something that I've learned throughout the years from my early childhood and into my early teens and early adulthood, and now that I developed myself as a man. To give you a little background about my father was born right after World War II. Was born in 1946. He was born in Soviet Union, and he was actually born and given into an orphanage house. So he grew up as an orphan. Later on, his mom found him, and they reunited. But he didn't really have that close a relationship with his family. He was a pretty hard man. He was a hard motherfucker. My dad has gone to prison since a very early age. He's been in and out of prison multiple times. He had a hard life. He developed certain issues like in alcoholism. Uh, he had some jealousy outbursts, and overall, he battled his demons. And now that I'm an adult and I realize certain things and I reflect and I think about them, I do realize that my dad had a lot of demons, and I can't say he was very good at fighting them off. But what I can say is that he has taught me a lot of lessons since a very young age, and those are the lessons that I've carried with myself throughout my life and are instilled in me. And he was always an example of those lessons. And I'm going to discuss those things. Some of those things are hard work, ownership, and importance of being fit, importance of being handy and being useful to other people, protecting and providing women and children, and some other things. But let me get into it. Okay, now that I gave you guys a little background about my dad, yes, he was a hard motherfucker. Yes, he did not fight his demons really well. But I think overall he was a good man. He never meant harm to anybody. He's done the best he could with the cards that were dealt to him, considering his childhood, considering him going to prison, considering the times that he grew up at. Because after World War II, Soviet Union was destroyed. That country was in poverty and in ruins, and that country is rebuilt himself. And if you guys are not familiar with that, Soviet Union, unlike capitalism here in America, your word means a lot. So if you can't stand up for yourself or you can't back up what you say and your word means shit, no one's going to respect you or take you seriously. So you have to be able to defend yourself. You have to be able to be a strong man to survive during those times. So, like I said, he has been dealt some cards that a lot of us are blessed not to have to deal with in our lives. How did it affect my childhood growing up? Well, certain things affected my childhood in a negative way, such as seeing domestic violence around the house. Mind you, he never raised his hand on my mom. However, he had a hair trigger temper, and every time he'd get upset, it was very easy for him to get him upset. And every time he get upset, he would like break stuff around the house, or he would throw stuff around and damage things. Well, it's funny enough, every time he'll damage something, he'll fix it. He was a great handyman. We never needed a handyman going up around the house. He was a man, he was a jack of all trades. With that said, I did grow up seeing a lot of arguments. I did grow up seeing a lot of domestic violence around my house. He did beat the shit out of me a handful of times. I can't say I recall maybe one time where he kind of, went a little hard on me, and I would consider it unnecessary. But every time he beat my asses for something that I've done. And I was an asshole kid growing up. I've done things that I'm not proud of, and I was a troublemaker. So majority of those times when I got my ass kicked by my dad, I deserve those things. However, I don't necessarily consider the fact that what I saw in my childhood was so bad, because at the end of the day, it made me the way I am today, developed me into a man, and I'm able to withstand and take a lot from life. I'm not easily disturbed by life, not easily shaken up. I can take a lot before I will really start to kind of crumble. So, in a sense, it kind of made me a stronger person. It actually did. The number one most important thing that I learned from my dad is the importance of hard work. My dad was the hardest working person I've ever seen in my entire life. Both of my parents were extreme hard workers. My mom worked multiple jobs, while my dad has always done something, whether it's around the house, whether it's going to work, whether it's, just being handy. And he had some hobbies. He was making knives. He was doing some other art. He was good at drawing. So he was always busy with something. So I learned the importance of hard work. And he would always say that. He would always say, it's important to work hard, because that bleeds into all aspects of your life. And the most important thing I noticed, he was always an example of it. I never really seen him lay on his ass and not do something about his life. He would always work hard. Even when he had to quit his job and retire, he would always still work around the house. He'll work in the backyard. He'll plow the field. He'll build something. He always found something to do, and he always worked hard. Up until the day where he had his first stroke and follow up second stroke, and he just became immobile. He became sort of this disabled person, kind of like a vegetable, and he spent the last few years of his life kind of being, you know, in that state. But up until then, he was always a hard worker, and he was an example of it. And he instilled those things in me since a very early age by having me do chores around the house. When he would leave for work, I remember he would always tell me, "All right, you're gonna have to do this, this, and that. Like, you're gonna have to go grocery shopping. You have to clean the house. You have to clean this." He would always have me do something on the house, and then in a way, I would earn certain things after taking care of those chores. And I remember one time it was like a solar eclipse. It was a big deal. I forgot what year it was. I was a teenager. It was like one of those super massive and important solar eclipses where it only happens like once every 100 years. And that day he assigned me a bunch of errands. And my dumbass, instead of taking care of that, I was snuck out of the house, and I went to play video games. And I come back home, and the dad is home. He got home early, and I was terrified. I knew he was gonna whoop my ass. And I remember he was upset, but what he did, he gave me uh, like goggles, specifically like blue shaded goggles, so I can put them on and look at the sky without getting blinded by the sun and actually see the eclipse. But he was a little upset. But after that, he still let me see the eclipse and witness it on my own. And then I had to take the goggles off and continue with my errands. So that's very nice of him. But in a sense, all those chores that he made me do every day around the house build my character, instill hard work in me, and instill responsibility in me. And he always expected things to be done right the first time. If you do something, you gotta do it the right way. He expected to do it the right way, and that also stuck with me for the rest of my life, whether it's at work or a business, or if I have somebody in my team or people around me uh, have them do something. I always expect them to do things right the first time, or at least I encourage them to do things the right time the first time, because I don't want to have to come in and have to fix it after them. And when it comes to me, when somebody assigns me something to do, or I have to complete a task or take care of something, I try to do it right the first time, so nobody has to clean up my mess. So that's important. That stuck with me for the rest of my life. Hard work, being an example of hard work, doing chores around the house, and doing things right the first time. The next thing I learned is that it's important to be fit. My dad has always been fit his entire life. He's never been fat. He's never been overweight. He's never been obese. He did have a very bad habit that I believe ruined his health. Well, actually, two of those habits. One was smoking. He smoked like a chimney. And two, he loved to drink. Like, my dad was actually an alcoholic. Most of the time he controlled it, but then he would go off and he would start drinking. It would go for days, and he would just drink and drink and drink, and he would just be a different person. And I remember growing up around that, and I always hated when he would get to the point where he was really drunk Even though like when he get a little drunk, he would come home and he loved kids. He would come and he would play with us. He would play with me, my friends, and whatever the cousins, whoever would come over. He always loved kids. But I say this to say that those two habits, I believe, contributed to the fact that he passed away in his 70s. He was what, I think 78 or so. Nonetheless, I think those two habits contributed to his health and contributed to his stroke, multiple strokes back to back, and that's what made him kind of immobile. And eventually, he passed away. May he rest in peace. But he's always been fit. I remember I was a teenager and my dad was probably in his 50s and he was building a pull-up bar in the backyard, and I was like, "Well, why do you need this pull-up bar for?" And he built a pull-up bar, and he not only for himself but also for people around in the area, for our neighbors to use. And he's like, "I built this bar so people can exercise." And instead of explaining to me anything further, he gets on the bar, he grabs it, and he starts racking out pull-ups and raising his feet all the way to the bar, doing leg raises. And I was like, damn, I mean, this guy is in his 50s and he's still fit. And he was always lean. He was always in good shape. He had abs. Literally, he had old man strength. That dude was strong. So he was another example for me that it's important for a man to be fit and strong. And that carried on with me for the rest of my life. I work out every day. I train. I keep myself in shape. I don't have a belly. I'm not obese, and I try to take care of myself to the best of my abilities. So that if something shit hits the fan, I'm able to take care of myself, to defend myself and the people around me. And he was always an example of being fit and taking care of your body. Another thing I learned is I learned how to be handy. My dad was an amazing handyman. He was a jack of all trades. We never needed any kind of professional in the house, whether it was an electrician, plumber, roofer, contractor, nothing. By profession, my dad was a welder, but other than that, he knew how to do everything around the house. He really was a jack of all trades, and I admired that about him because we never needed anybody to fix anything around the house. He was the person to go to, and then neighbors would also come over and ask him for help. So he knew how to fix shit around the house, and seeing that kind of also inspired me since a very early age. I would try to do things on my own around the house, whether it's electrical or some minor like plumbing or some minor fixing. I was never afraid to get down and dirty. And I remember recently this year when I bought my house and I was remodeling it, I actually took joy in being able to work around the house on my house and fix things up, and because I haven't done it in a long time. So to me that was a good reminder how important it is to be handy and knowing how to do things around the house as a man. My dad was always great at it. Another thing I learned from an example is that a man should be able to and needs to be able to protect women, children, and the weak and the innocent. And I'll give you guys a little story. My dad and I were coming home from a nearby bar or lounge or something. He was a little tipsy, so we're walking home. A lot of times I spent time with my dad when he would go out drinking, and he would spend time with me. We would talk. He loved to spend time with me, and as a kid, I always tag along with him. And he was tipsy, and so we were walking home. We were like half a block away from the house, and next thing you know, at a bus stop, there was a guy and his wife was carrying a little baby in her hands, and the guy was yelling and screaming and grabbing her and I think pulling her hair, and at the same time trying to flag down a cab. And it's obvious that this guy was like out of his mind. He was about to beat up his wife, his woman, and hurt her. So what my dad did, without hesitation, he approached the man and he grabbed him and he pulled him back and told him to stop. But the man wasn't listening. So he pushed my dad away, and he finally flagged down the cab, and he opened the door and he started shoving his wife inside the car, and she was refusing to get in. So he grabbed her head and he's trying to push her inside the car by hitting her head on a side of the door to just shove her body inside the car. So what my dad did, my dad approached him from the back, kind of put him like on a modified chokehold, and made him release his wife and pulled him back with him and held him there in that position until his wife got in the car, told the cab driver where to go, and the cab drove off. And only after the cab drove off, my dad finally let the guy go and told him to, walk away. And the guy tried to start an argument, continue an argument, or fight my dad. When my dad told him, "Look, dude, don't try your luck. I'm gonna leave you right here, right now, unconscious. You try to do something to me." And I remember that stuck with me. And I was maybe must have been 12 or 11 or 13 years old. I don't know. But I remember that incident. And I learned that as a man, you must be able to protect the weak and the innocent, the children, the elderly, the women. It is your job as a man to do so. And even though I've experienced a lot of domestic violence at home, a lot of arguing, a lot of things being broken around the house by my dad, he never raised his hand on my mom, ever. He never intentionally put his hand on my mom, no matter what, no matter how bad the argument got. Yeah, he would break something around the house, he would smash the hole in the wall, or in the door, but he would never hit my mom, no matter what. So that example stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I remember that really well. And to me, it was a good example of the fact that as a man, you need to be able to protect the weak and the innocent, no matter what. It is your job, it is your responsibility as a man. And that's what makes a good masculine man, is being able to protect yourself and other people around you, even if you don't know these people. But you have to protect the weak and the innocent. So I remember that really well. Another thing that I learned from my dad is my dad used to love read books. I mean, my dad had a whole library, like walls filled with books. He had a massive library and he always read. He loved to read books. He loved to just kind of dive into a book and get lost in it. And since a very young age, he also would make me read books. I had other people in my family, like my aunt, who would make me read books, but she was more into poetry. But my dad would read anything and everything he could get his hands on. And that habit stuck with me for the rest of my life. I remember as a kid, I hated it. I'm like, why do I have to read books? It's so boring. But over the years, as I got older, as I became an young adult and into my adulthood, and until this day, I'm 34 years old. As you can see, I have books right here. I have books behind me. I have more books around the house. I listen to a lot of books nowadays, mostly just because I'm lack of time. And when I drive somewhere, I always listen to books, or if I'm working out, or if I'm doing something like a low cardio activity, like cardio workout or running, I like to listen to books. So that habit stuck with me. And I'm very thankful for that because books are full of knowledge. Imagine a book is like a person that has lived on this planet that left a lot of knowledge, that wrote a book and it passed away, but everything that was here in their mind is now written in the book. So you literally grabbing the book and you're absorbing that knowledge from that person. And that person might have lived 100, 200, 300 years ago, but they spilled their knowledge on a piece of paper and now it's in the book, and you can get that book and you can read it and get into the mindset of that person. That's why I love books so much. I try to read as much as I can. Uh, I listen to a lot of books, but I also buy a lot of books and I own books and I go back to them. For example, right now I'm rereading Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill for the third time. That book is phenomenal. I highly suggest that book to everyone. And I might even make an episode dedicated to all the books that have changed my life, such as Outwitting the Devil, Hard Times Create Strong Men, You're a Badass, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and the list goes on. There's a lot of books that affected my life and made me a better person. But I want you guys to understand that a book is like finding a treasure. If you find a great book, you're able to dive into the mind of a person who wrote it and extract that knowledge and absorb it and use it for yourself. That's why I love books so much. But like I said, my dad used to love to read. I can't necessarily say he read a lot of self-development books. He used to read a lot, anything that he can get his hands on, a lot of fiction, a lot of historical books. Me, on the other hand, I read a lot of self development. I love learning about how to make myself a better person, how to develop as a man, how to become a better person. I read books on self mastery and self development and everything and anything that can help me become a better person. So that's just me. So those are the things that I've learned directly from my dad, and he was an example of. But I also learned things from him that I will not do, and I believe it's important to talk about those things as well, such as the bad things and negative things that I saw him do that I told myself in my early 20s that I will never allow myself to do that or to become that or to be that way. For example, one of the things is do not let things boil up. My father has fought a lot of demons in his life, and I think he coped with them through drinking, alcohol, and other destructive habits. but he would always let things boil up. And when he would explode, he would explode. I mean, there was one time when my dad broke nearly everything around the house. He just went on a rage. He was drunk and he just went on a rage, and pretty much it was a bad time. But I think a lot of that contributed to the fact that he did not know how to control his emotions as a man, and he did not know how to express his emotions. So he would let him boil up, and then he would explode. And he had a pretty bad hair trigger anger issues. So what I've learned is that I will never allow myself to let emotions boil up inside of me. When I was in my early 20s, when I wasn't going, in my 20s in general, early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, I had that inside of me. I would not talk to people. I would let things boil up inside of me, and I will blow up. I mean, I had some serious anger issues. As a matter of fact, some of my girlfriends at the time, oh man, I give them props for putting up with me because I was a different person. I am a way better, more patient, calm person right now at this point in my life at 34 years old than I was in my 20s. I mean, I was an explosive, angry little asshole back then. And it took me a decade, or maybe even more than a decade, to earn that patience, to learn how to become patient and control my anger and be able to express my emotions and talk to people. And as a result, I now have a healthy relationship. I'm now able to communicate with my woman, with people around me, whether it's in business or at work or my colleagues or my friends. Sometimes you need to have really, really uncomfortable conversations, and that takes guts. And you need to be clear on what you're communicating. I believe that's very important. So as I've developed that inside of me, and I told myself I will never let things boil up inside of me, because all that leads to is blowing up and just becoming destructive to yourself and to the people around you. The next thing is that I learned from my dad is that I reverse learned from my father is that you need to be able to control your anger. I mean, my dad, when he would go in his rage mode, he would go in his rage mode, and nothing around him would be safe. So I told myself that I will never allow myself to get to that point of being angry. What has helped me with dealing with controlling my anger is obviously working out. Fitness is a big part of it, and learning martial arts, learning how to be violent in a way that I can deliver a certain level of violence, but I am calm and collected about it. If somebody's pissing me off, I prefer to take a step back, reevaluate the situation, and not let anger get the best of me. But I mean, we're all human. To this day, sometimes once in a while, somebody will say something or do something that will irritate me and piss me off. And I'm only human. I might, not lose my temper, but I get agitated or annoyed by that person. But I always try to calm myself down and look at the situation differently. Because what it does for me, if I let the anger take control of me, then it clouds my mind and I will be unable to make a rational decision. But by taking a step back, taking a couple of breaths and reassessing the situation, it helps me to realize that, hey, this person is not really a threat to me, number one, so I shouldn't be angry at him. Number two, I'm not afraid of speaking up to that person and standing up for myself. And number three, maybe that person is going through something right now that's making him or her feel that way. So why should I respond with anger? Because anger is like a gift. If somebody gives you a gift, if you accept it, that's yours now. But if you don't accept it, that person still has to hang on to that gift. So if somebody pisses you off, you have two options. Option number one is accept it, and now that person has transferred the anger and frustration onto you, and you are the carrier of it now. Or you just refuse to accept it, and you let them be angry, let them stay angry, and you walk away a better, calmer person. So that's the thing that I had to learn early on, is that I need to be able to control my anger. And fitness is a big part of that. Some days I wake up just a pissed off motherfucker, and I have to go to the gym and I have to get that out of me. Because if I don't get that out of me, it's just gonna continue to boil up inside of me and eventually lead up to destructive things. The next thing that I've learned is jealousy is a killer of relationship. I mean, my dad was pretty jealous of my mother, and to be honest with you, I believe is because he probably thought that my mom was way out of his league. And to be honest with you, looking back at the young pictures of my mom and my dad, my mom, she was a gorgeous woman when she was young. Now she's in her 70s. She's obviously older, but when she was a young lady, she was absolutely stunning. She was beautiful. She was gorgeous. Just a overall a dime piece, if that makes sense for all you youngsters out there. And my dad was not exactly the most handsome man on the block. So I think maybe that contributed to the fact that he was always jealous, is because he was insecure about himself. And jealousy essentially ruined the relationship between my mom and my dad, and they eventually separated. But after talking to my mom many, many times about it, I realized that my dad's jealous behavior is what ruined their relationship. And I mean, he would suffocate her with his jealousy a lot of times, pretty much all the time. And that transferred into me because I have had a relationship in my life where one of my ex girlfriends was absolutely ridiculously jealous, and that drove the relationship to the ground. She just will not have it in any other way. And I think in her that came from previous trauma, and maybe she's been cheated on before. But to be completely honest with you guys, and I'm gonna keep it real, I'm not an ugly dude. I'm a decent looking dude. I take care of myself. I have a certain status in life, the way I carry myself. I'm a manly man. So by default, with the way that I am and with my confidence level, yeah, I can't say that I will necessarily not attract a lot of women, but I was never a cheater. I've always gotten attention from other women, but I was never a cheater. And in her mind, if a female coworker would text me something asking me about work, literally about work, she would not have it. For her, it will be just a big no-no, or I can't spend time anywhere outside of her where there's women, or I can't go to my friend's party, because there'll be some other friends' girlfriends there, and I could not stand anymore, and eventually I broke that relationship off. But I would tell her, I'm like, listen, I grew up in a household where my father was extremely jealous, and that ruined my parents' marriage. And I would always tell her, like, stop being so jealous, stop being so jealous. But I guess she fought her, she had her own demons and skeletons in her closet, and she never really invested in her own mind, in her own self-development and self-mastery. So eventually the relationship, I had to end the relationship because it was getting pretty toxic and I could not stand it anymore. So for me, I learned that I will never be jealous, and I had to develop the trait of not being jealous by being confident. So I invested in my own confidence instead. I read, I learned self mastery, I worked out, I've done things that brought my confidence up. And with high levels of confidence and self esteem, I don't have a need to be jealous. I don't have that in me. If my girlfriend wants to go out, spend time with her friend, I don't care. Yeah, I know that there's some dudes around her who might be looking at her because she's a pretty woman or trying to talk to her. And I know for a fact dudes been reaching out to her versus, whether it's DMs or somewhere at the gym or something. But it doesn't bother me. I don't have that low self-esteem. I'm not jealous. So yeah, that's what I learned, is that jealousy in a relationship will eventually ruin the relationship. And it goes both ways for men and women. And last but not least, one of the most important things that I learned is that it is very, very important to make peace with your demons. Because if you don't make peace with your demons, that will destroy your life. And what I mean by that is that you have to be able to accept, deal, and resolve the trauma in your life. We all have trauma in our lives. Everyone in this life has trauma in life. If you haven't had any trauma in your life, you haven't lived life. Even the most successful people, especially the most successful people, such as my mentors that I look up to, I mean, they had enormous trauma in their life. And looking back at my life, my early childhood, my childhood, I don't have a lot of good memories from my childhood. Experiencing a lot of violence, drugs, domestic violence, abuse, physical violence, bullying, alcohol. I think those things that I saw, I shouldn't have seen as a child. But I realized in my 20s that I can either let that baggage carry on with me and it will always pull me down, or I face it, I accept it, I take it for what it is, I learn from it, and I move on. And that's what I did. And it took me about 10 years now. I'm 34. I started my self-development, self-mastery journey, I would say my mid-20s, simply by just watching motivational videos. And eventually I started, listening to these people, uh, studying them, understanding what is it to deal with childhood trauma, early adulthood trauma. And I saw some professionals that helped me go through that. And one by one, I started opening the door, or that closet door, and letting those skeletons out. Don't get me wrong, I still have a couple of skeletons in my closet. So really, really, really big ones. But I'm making peace with them one at a time. I don't let those skeletons and those demons pull me down to the ground. And that's what I always tell the people that I talk to, whether it's my friends or some of the young guys that I mentor, that I coach. I always tell them, the first thing I tell them when I see them, like, what are the demons that hunt you? What are the skeletons in your closet? Give them to me. Because you can't move forward unless you make peace with those demons. No matter what you try, you won't be able to. They'll always drag you down. They'll always try to make you less of a person. You can't spend your time and your energy thinking about the past. The past is in the past. There's nothing you can do to go back in the past and change things, no matter how hard you try. We have not invented a time machine yet. And even if we will, you've already experienced that emotion. It's not going to be erased in your mind. You would have to be able to travel back in time, change that fact, and maybe by some miracle, that will be eliminated from your brain. But hey, I don't know. Maybe one day. If you have a time machine and know how to do it, let me know. So another thing that people do when they want to deal with their demons or not deal with them is they run away from them and they drink, they use drugs, and they engage into deadly, unproductive habits, such as wasting your time, sleeping in, overeating, cheating, using drugs, and doing other stupid shit that doesn't benefit you in your life. So I highly suggest it to you guys, especially young men. You have to be able to face your demons. You have to. You absolutely have to. For two things. Number one, you have to get them out of your life. It's trash. Accept your past for what it is. Learn from it. Okay? Then close the door and throw away the key. And in return, what it does to you is it makes you a better person. It makes you a wiser person. It makes you a stronger person. As a man, you need to be able to go through adversity. You need to be able to go through that pain and suffering because it makes you stronger. We're different creatures. We're different beasts. God put us on this planet to be protectors and providers. And we can't allow ourselves to be weak and innocent. You understand what I'm saying? Men need to protect the weak and the innocent, not become the weak and the innocent. That's not our job. That's not what we're here for on this planet. We have to be able to stand up for yourself and to protect ourselves and people around us. But how are you going to protect yourself and not be weak if you're not making peace with those demons? So what I highly suggest to you young men out there is the same thing I suggest to a couple of young guys that I coach out there, or they'll reach out to me on social media sometimes. Or I say, the first thing I say is make peace with your demons. Accept it for who they are. Stop running away from them. Whatever trauma you have in your life, accept it and face it. And a lot of times, it's hard to do. It's extremely hard to do. But that's what professionals are there for. Go see a professional. Invest into a professional. They'll be able to tell you things from a different perspective. Like I had a guy that was telling me, this young kid that I'm kind of mentoring, he told me that one of his biggest demons is that his father left him. So he's dealing with abandonment issues. He does not trust people because his father left him. And that sucks. I can only imagine what that kid has gone through in his life, because his father not only left him and abandoned him when he really needed him, he also does not have a role model, a male figure role model in his life. So not only is he dealing with the pain and of abandonment, he also has zero role models in his life to show him what it's like to be a man. So the first thing I had him do is sit down and talk to him and tell him that he has to accept the fact that his father left him and he's never going to come back. And that's okay, because now he's becoming a man. And now it's his job to develop himself into a man, a strong man, a confident man, a responsible man that's not going to abandon his family, that's not going to run away from his problems, that's not going to indulge into drinking and doing drugs and sleeping with different women every time. No, he needs to invest into himself, his body, his mind, his spirit, and all those things. So that's what I'm working on with that guy right now. I believe we're past the point where he accepted his demons. We had a bunch of different conversations and sessions together, and now we're moving on to the part that, okay, these are the qualities and values of what it's like to be a man. And he's never seen them. He's never had a male figure in his life to tell him, okay, a man has to be a hard worker, has to be responsible, cannot be a victim. He has to be a victor of his life. He has to invest into himself. He has to work hard. He has to take care of his body, his mind. He can't accept weakness. So those are the things we're working on now. But I could not have gotten to him to that point, to the point of teaching him how to do those things until we got that skeleton out of the closet. So once he was past it, once he made peace with it, he's now able to learn of what it's like to be a man. So my advice to you guys is, whatever the trauma you have in your life, whatever the pain, the suffering, or the demons you're still battling in your mind, stop running away from them. Just accept them. Accept them for what they are, for who they are. Because if you keep running away from them, if you keep drinking or doing drugs, the next day you wake up hungover, like feeling like shit, and those problems are still there. So face them and deal with them one day at a time. It's going to be hard. Believe me, it's going to be hard. But one day at a time, bit by bit, you will chip away at that problem until eventually it will go away. Or it'll become so small and minute that it's not going to bother you anymore. So if that's one piece of advice I can leave you guys with today, that will be it. Thank you guys for listening. This is not an easy episode for me to make. I had to sit down. I had to write these things out. I'm not going to lie. I spent some time crying in the last 2 days, but I got that out of my system, and I chose to pay respect to my father, not only by taking care of all the funeral costs and whatever it costs to give him a proper burial and send him on his way, because I believe that I owe him that. He raised me that way, and I have the capability and the ability and the finances to take care of that. So I believe it's my responsibility to do so. But also I chose not to let those demons haunt me, because I made peace with them, and remember him and celebrate him by all the good things that my dad taught me and all the great things that I saw him do, because it was an example of. So Dad, I love you. May you always rest in peace. And my advice to you guys is that hard work will always beat talent. Be the best version of yourself that you can be. Do not settle for mediocre. And life gets better once you accept your demons and start working on yourself. So this is all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm sorry if it's a little emotional or a little heavy on you, but I hope you learned the lessons that I was trying to give you guys and share some of my experiences. If you find anything here of value, please click like, share, and subscribe. It helps my channel. It helps me to know that you guys are listening and you guys find some value in what I try to put out there. All I'm doing is sharing my experience with you and sharing the things with you that made me a better person and helped me succeed in life. So if you like it, and even if you don't like it, I still appreciate a like and a share. Thank you guys for listening. See you guys next time.